Hey, everybody, let me introduce you to my guest today. This is Kelly Ferguson. Kelly, welcome to Travel and Cruise Industry News podcast, which we also call Chili Chats.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
All right, first of all, I had hoped to be a speaker at the LA Expo here several weeks ago. And as it worked out, they were down to picking between three people, and I wasn't the one chosen. So I didn't get to come out there for that, but I'll have plenty of time to do it. You and your company, uh, had a booth there at the LA Expo.
Correct.
First
Yep.
of all, how did the expo go?
I went really well. It's always fun. This is the first time we've had a booth at the LA Expo. I've been to the expo many times before, so it's kind of interesting to be on the other side of the table.
Yeah.
But anytime we do an expo like this, it's really interesting to get kind of everybody's feedback, kind of hands-on feedback on all of our products. We've come up with about a dozen or so now, and I've learned, long ago that a device that works for me and my little quad hands might not work for everybody. So we got tons of feedback on how to tweak a few little things and make things even more accessible and more universal.
So my audience will know. Give us a little bit of back. I mean, I'm familiar with your background, but let my audience know how and why you're in the chair.
So back in 1995, I suffered a spinal cord injury at the C5 level. It was a construction accident. And so I'm pretty much your standard C5 quad. I got some some tenodesis going, but other than that, no real finger function to speak of. And so I've got the limited trunk control, just and then I've been lucky enough to be able to strong enough to stay in a manual chair for as long as possible. But when I went to college, I was in a power chair for a number of years. It's just kind of going back and forth between that. And then as far as KFK Designs goes, I started that probably about 7 or 8 years ago when I got my first 3D printer. And once you give a quad a 3D printer, that's just like Pandora's box. It's like all these different ideas and things I've had in the back of my mind to make things just life for me just a little bit easier day to day. And so now I'm getting those out and trying to share that with as many people as possible.
One of the things that I found so fascinating when I did a little research about you, and I'll explain how I got to you to start with, but in a second.
Sure.
But my great grandfather, and of course, that was back 150 years ago, was a trapper. And he had a logging accident that cut off his right hand, just about above the wrist.
Okay.
And he manufactured his own little, like a stump covering glove with a screw in it. And he made his own forks, knives, tools that he used around the farm, and that kind of thing that is screwed into his arm. So his one bad arm was still as usable as ever. But I see a lot of the things in your designs that I've seen in his tools from 150 years ago, which is just phenomenal.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I try to keep everything as simple as possible, and then that's why we try to keep the prices of all the products as low as possible too.
Right. All right. So the thing that introduced me to you, quite frankly, was a post about uh, your hotel experience for the expo.
Okay.
So walk us through that.
So we made reservations. We couldn't do it through Expedia for the. We wanted to be as close as possible to the expo, and so we found a hotel right across the street, and it was called the AC, which I'd never heard of before. I guess it's an offshoot or a Hilton or Hyatt, one of those. And so you see the picture on the website, and you get there, and you never quite know what you're going to get into. All I know is they said that the lobby was going to be on the 34th floor, which is pretty unconventional for your typical hotel. And so the biggest thing was just trying to figure out how to get into the place and park. And so I think we did about 3 laps around the whole building itself before we realized A, where we could park, and B, actually get in there for the valet, because it was just like, it's not only the AC, but it's like basically 2 hotels in the same building, which is, I guess, is a new fad they've started going with. And so all the lower floors are the Moxie, which has its own branding and its own thing. And then the upper floors are the AC. And then sandwiched in between those on the 8th floor is like a whole like little boutique restaurant suite of restaurants, which is its own separate thing, which we had to discover when we went out to eat that night. And so, yeah, we got the valet, we got parked, and we made it up to the 34th floor and checked into the hotel room. And then you take a separate set of elevators down to your room at that point. And we got into the room, no problem. And you can tell it's a pretty new hotel. And I was blown away by the accessible bathroom. It was probably the best one we've stayed at, as far as being able to roll under the sinks. You can actually see in the mirror and roll into and then the roll-in shower. There was no obstructions there. It was pretty nice once we found the room.
So it ended up being a good experience.
Oh yeah. So and then that was just getting to the room and then trying to figure out how to get to they call it level 8 for all the restaurants. You take your elevators back up to the 34th floor, take the separate elevator back down to the ground floor. And at that point, right next to the valet, tucked in the corner, is like a little separate door that says level 8. And this is where all my Legend of Zelda years playing of that came in to experience. Because like we found level 8, it was just like in Zelda. We had to, go out and buy a candle and burn the bush, and there it was. And you take another separate set of elevators just to that level, and then you get all the different little restaurants that are all tucked away up there.
But eventually you did get there, so you did get to eat.
Yes. And then the other thing we discovered is, since the Moxie and the AC are all in the same building, if you take your elevators down to level 9, it's like this secret bridge between the two hotels, and you can take the Moxie elevators down to ground floor and get to the little coffee shop and stuff. So by the end of the weekend, we had it pretty much dialed in.
Yeah. All right. So when you do, you're married and have 2 kids, right?
One child. Yep.
One child. One
Yep.
child. Okay. And when you go to the shows like you did for the expo, does Karen go with you?
Oh yeah. She's like, she doesn't have a choice basically, and
Okay.
it's great because she can help sell some of the merchandise too. While we kind of like, I'll do some of the video game stuff, and she'll do her little salesperson spiel with all the different products there behind the booth.
Yeah. Okay.
And so yeah, we make a pretty good team.
All right. So let's talk a little bit more about your products. Give me some idea. Give my audience some ideas
Oh sure.
about what you're actually making and selling.
Okay, yeah. So almost all the products predominantly for anybody with limited hand function, or you have weak hands or arthritis or anything. And so again, it all just became like a necessity for me. Like here is, let me see if I can get up to the camera properly. Here is my adaptive stylus. Let's see if I can get the right. And then I don't need any grip to hold on to it.
Okay.
And so then it's all, and then I found a company that actually makes it's conductive filament. And so this will actually, I can use it on a tablet or anything like that, or an iPhone. And I couldn't put this thing down if I wanted to right now. It's stuck to my hand.
Yeah.
So anything like that that'll help with your grip. And then the one of the very first things I came up with was a writing aid, because I like to paint and draw.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the, even back when I was in rehab, I wasn't happy with any of the little writing splints they had at the time. So I actually had one of the OTs help make, they ended up looking almost like brass knuckles. That's what everybody calls them. And so that was the very first one that I had out of just like a thermoplastic. This is like 20 years before they had 3D printers. And so when I got my first 3D printer, that was one of the very first things I did was make my own writing aid. And I found, like I said, at some of the shows that that one worked for me, but it didn't work for everybody. So I worked on coming up with this version, which again is just kind of like the stylus, where it sticks right to my hand
Yeah.
and it holds the pen in a perfect, for me, a perfect writing position. And that's one of the things we found at the show in LA is we got some feedback where you can see the little red part right there
All right.
is held by the black plastic part. People wanted that to be able to pivot so they could move it forward and backwards. And so that's what I've been working on the last week or so, is a version where you want to move the pen forward or backwards, you can pivot it around so it works, even try to make it even more universal for everybody's needs.
All right. Now you paint. Do you call it paint? Draw?
Yeah,
I
so I do
It's called an
abstract.
art gallery, but
Yeah,
I'm not
so
sure how to call
yeah,
it.
I would say I do acrylic abstract paintings on canvas.
Okay.
And then I've also started, since I've got the 3D printers, started doing 3D sculpture, using the actual printers to do sculptures, which once I got hurt, I thought, sculpture, that's completely off the table. So now it's kind of opened another avenue for some of my creativity.
I th- for somebody that is a complete, total uh, idiot when it comes to technical things, how the devil does a 3D printer work?
So it's basically like you take a 2D printer, a paper printer, you just add an extra axis, a Z axis, where everything goes straight up. And so we take basically like a roll of filament, which is kind of like, you have to think back to like the old weed whacker days where you get that roll of nylon. That's
Yeah,
one of the
yeah.
first things they started with, where they would feed that in, you heat it up and it melts, and you just run that through a little tiny nozzle, just like you would, almost like an ink through a pen, and it lays down thin little layers, thinner than a sheet of paper, but you slowly stack those up, and then eventually you end up with a 3D design or a 3D product. Let's see if I can show
Wow.
this. So here is a, let me see if I can get this up here. Here's a little cylinder, and if you get just close enough, you can almost see the little individual lines as it goes up and up and up.
Yeah.
And the trick is with the new printers to make those lines almost disappear so you can't tell. And so for me, like I said, I started with my first one 8 years ago, and I went with the printer that was completely open source. And the company, they actually encouraged users to modify the printers, and so that's the first thing I did was, yeah, I used the printer. It printed 6 by 6 by 6, and the first thing I did was use the printer to make parts for the printer to make a bigger printer, so I could do 6 by 12, and just kind of go from there.
Cool.
And so yeah, it almost becomes like self-replicating at that point.
Right. All right. So what's ahead for you guys?
So yeah, now it's like I said, it's always fun getting all the feedback. So I've been working on. We have the styluses that go around your hand. We got feedback where someone wanted a one to go on the end of your finger, and so I'm actually going to start working. I have a prototype going of what I call my thimble stylus, and so it'll go on
Mhm.
the tip of your finger, and it'll grab it kind of like almost like a little, little stitch right on there, and then you can use your tablet or anything else just like you would with a typical stylus. And then one of the other things we got with the feedback from the show was we had you might just see it over my shoulder, right over there.
Yeah.
Uh, the quad gamer, the video game controller. A lot of people are saying, why don't you just take these to gaming expos, because people are going to these kind of searching for alternate ways to play the game. Because we got a lot of kids came to the show and they really loved playing with the controller. And some of these younger kids had never had a chance. They could watch their siblings play that they couldn't play themselves. And so in June, we're going to hit the SoCal Gaming Expo in Pasadena and actually take the controllers and see how things go with that.
Shoot, that's great.
And then other than that, we got some feedback. Let me pull this up here on our grip-free grabber.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, so I've got this set up so you can plunge down and open it without having to pull a trigger like a typical grabber. We got feedback on that where some people, the spring was too difficult for them to use. And the way I've got the design set up now, I like it because it always has clamping pressure. So once you grip something, you can pull it up with no problem.
Right.
Some people had issues with that. So like I said, trying to make everything as universal. I want to either make a way where you can remove the spring and use it just as a manually, and also kind of make the handle, the gripping handle a little more universal too, so you can have a push or a pull force on it. And then the ultimate would be able to have the whole thing fold in half, so it's much more, you can transport it more easily. And
Nice.
so yeah, taking all the stuff we learned at the expo and kind of integrating that into the products we have, and also new products down the road too, because when we went to Phoenix, I probably had maybe 7 or 8 adaptive devices, and we got, everybody said, hey, we need utensils. And so that was the first thing I did after Phoenix, was we rolled out all the utensil adaptive things. And I got probably some of the best feedback was, someone said it was what they said life-changing for them, being able to use the utensils without injuring themselves while they're eating. So it was just
Right.
super inspirational and heartening to hear someone say that about something that you've made.
Yeah. I'm just I feel so blessed to have been able to chat with you. I do what I do because I want to prove to people that you don't have to sit at home and feel sorry for yourself. Get off your butt and go do what you love to do, which for me happens to be traveling and cruising.
Mm-hmm.
So I do that all the time anymore. And I've developed it into something that not only is good for me because I get to go cruising, but I work with cruise ships on trying to make them more accessible. I actually do a complete study on every ship I'm on. Uh, but also to show people that are in similar or worse situations than I'm in that you don't have to sit at home and feel sorry for yourself. Let's get out and go. So here you are making people's lives so much better from what you need. So it's just awesome.
Yeah, thanks.
So, all right. So your next show is going to be in Pasadena,
Yep.
and that's how soon?
So yeah, it's coming up June 8th and 9th. We'll
June
be at
8th to 9th.
yeah, it'd be kind of interesting taking some of the, to the controllers to kind of a different audience. But
Right.
everybody who sees them, they really love the fact that you can. Then it's the same thing for me. I bought the controllers and I made it just so I can play the games myself with my son. And I figured if it works for me, I'll get it out there and see if I can help anybody else get back into the game.
Yeah, that's great. All right. Well, I can't thank you enough, Kelly, for joining me today and chatting and sharing a little bit about your life.
So of
And
course, yeah, thanks for having me again. Yeah,
okay. Thank you so much, Kelly, and we'll talk again real soon. And good luck in Pasadena.
awesome. Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Bye.